Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Mulberry leadership conversation. I'm going to give everybody just a few moments to log on. Okay, it looks like we are successfully logging on. So again, welcome to a Mulberry Talent Partners leadership conversation. My name is Kelsey Daly, and I am the Talent Acquisition Specialist here at Mulberry. So a little bit about Mulberry. We are a full-service staffing and recruiting agency headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with an office in the Silicon Valley. We specialize in the professional placements of human resources, professional and financial office, payroll, and operations positions with direct hire, temp to hire, and temporary opportunities. I would encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to see our current suite of service offerings, as well as our previous and upcoming leadership conversations. So jumping into introductions, we are joined today by Lauren Francis and Jeff Eyman. Lauren is our fabulous founder and president. She started Mulberry back in June of 2017 and comes with over 25 years of talent acquisition experience. We're also joined by Jeff. Jeff comes with over 30 years of human resources leadership experience. He started a consulting business, JLE People Solutions, LLC, in 2001, focused on partnering with organizations, leaders, and HR professionals on how to attract, develop, and retain talent in this new world shaped by a global pandemic. Jeff has joined us for a 3-part series focused on the war on talent. So in this first conversation, he will be speaking about how to attract and retain talent. And we would like today to be super interactive, so do not shy away from using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will get to any and all questions that come in. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to Jeff and Lauren.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again, and thanks for joining us, and welcome, Jeff. I met Jeff over the phone 10 years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but we talked about a position, and I was on the phone with you for an hour. And which I'm sure doesn't surprise you. And it was you're just a delight. And it was just such a pleasure to talk with you. I just said, I'm going to remember this guy, and it wasn't the right role or whatever, but I just like, I want to stay in touch with this guy. So anyway, Jeff has joined us today. We've been in touch a lot. We've talked a lot about many, many things. And this is a topic that's timely, and we're so happy to have you. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. And, very much appreciative of what Mulberry is doing with these conversations, because I think when you're in a presentation, I think it's very difficult to interact with whoever's presenting. So we do want to make this interactive. There's no PowerPoint slides. There's some questions that Lauren and I have gone over, and each one of us brings experience and our own current challenges we have, and those are all relevant, because if we express those, then all of us get to learn collectively. And so anyway, you want to begin, Lauren?
Well, yeah. So this is, true to the conversation, right? The leadership conversation, because that's really, in many ways, that's what we really wanted to do, was just talk to people about what they're seeing and what they're doing and what their expertise is and how they could add value to the audience and the people that join us. So, the war on talent, where did that come from? And can you talk about, what that means to you and what you're seeing?
Yeah. And also I would challenge everybody that, whenever you're going through some development or training or whatever, find the opportunity to find one aha, something that you didn't know before, something that kind of jogs your thought process and makes you think. Those are the most important things. So war on talent, very interesting. McKinsey company around 97 and kind of coined the term. And the challenge at that time was the baby boomer retirements. And it was really global. Japan was going to have a difficulty, Europe. And so if you think about the tactics back then, it was not only retaining and attracting talent, but it was also building talent, and a concept called knowledge capture, which is we can't let somebody go that's had 25 years experience without knowing what they know. And so there's a lot of effort to put into that. And then in 2000, we had the .com crash, and that changed everything. So, if you look back then to now, there's always been a war on talent. I'd say probably in '08 with the financial problems that we had and the amount of layoffs, certainly more people looking for jobs than there were jobs available. But things picked up again. And, 9 years ago seems like a long time, but Amazon was opening up a distribution center for the first time in Washington, D.C. They had 600 positions open, and they had 23,000 applicants. And you just think about that nowadays. I'm not saying it's inverted, but we do have a big challenge with that. And there's some things that we can do. We have to figure out what we are in control of. Those things that we're not in control of, we just have to know they're there, but really focus on what we can control in our individual role in organization.
Right. Well, I know that what we're talking about today is attracting talent and retaining talent for the most part.
Yep.
And what I've noticed just from the work that we do is that the number one requirement for candidates is culture. And I also know, and that's ahead of benefits, compensation, flexibility, hybrid, remote, that kind of thing. But 75% of the, responding to Korn Ferry again, the 75% of candidates that it is unlikely that they would accept a job if they were treated poorly during the hiring process. And that's one of the, from our, vantage point, we see that all the time. Yeah. And so that's been a problem for a long time. And and generally it basically had to do with, we're too busy and, our process and all these other things, but not keeping, let's say, closely aligned with what that person is feeling on the other end. And not paying attention to that. So
yeah, no, I think that's important. There was also some early data that talked about culture not being as important in the beginning of the pandemic, the crisis we're currently in. And believe it or not, it's really hard to believe. I was thinking about it this morning. We're February of 2022, and effectively, in the US, the pandemic really started hitting people working from home in March of 2020.
Right.
So we're 2 years into this. And the challenge with that is, especially with the human condition of trying to deal with home life and everything that's going on there as well, is that we think we're going to end this next month. And we're always hopeful that it's going to end next month. Mm-hmm. And we have to get into a frame of mind that whatever it is may end, but we're forever changed. And if we're forever changed, then the question is, our vision, mission, and values, they may not have changed, but at the same time, they have been impacted. And so when we talk about culture, we really need to understand from the candidate perspective and drill into that of what do they mean by culture? Because culture is a term that means many things to many people. And really that candidate, you have to meet their needs in that moment. If that's your top candidate, you're looking to meet their needs, but you're also trying to spread whatever you're doing that's good in the culture to the other candidates that you're not going to offer the job to. So the word's out there and your employment brand improves and all of that. But I just find it interesting, even internally, when you ask people about the culture, everyone has a different opinion and a different thought about it. So you really got to drill down at what's important in your culture today. And what that candidate needs in terms of what they mean by culture.
Yeah. And then why we were talking about earlier before we started about candidates are really looking at behaviors from the leadership, and that the behaviors of the leadership really truly matches the culture and the mission, and matches the vision and the mission and the values of the organization. And it means something. And people are paying attention.
Yeah, and think about this. Think about if the candidate knows the company or organization espouses that they're nimble and quick, and they reach a process by which they're waiting a week or two to hear anything. And then once they hear something, another week or two. So 3 weeks, 4 weeks have gone on, and they're viewing that as, wow, they don't appear to be what they say,
Right.
because they're evaluating the process. But remember too, candidates, the most important thing is communication. It's the written communication. It's, if we're still using job postings that are the same content for the same job we would have posted in 19, we're really missing the mark here, because that job posting has really got to espouse what the company's about, how they've responded, how they take care of their employees, all of that bundled together with what the expectations of the job are. It's just, it's a buyer's market. You have people that can be very, very selective in what they're looking for. And, there's good and there's challenges that come with remote work. 2019, if somebody was looking for another job, they might be absent from work. Now they're not absent from work. In some ways, they're always trying to do what's better, because the belief on compensation for them is that if I'm going to get an increase, the biggest one I'm going to get is when I move to another company. And so internally, we've got to make sure, and that's the retention part, that we're addressing that, so we're not building a very large pipeline needed for attraction. But culture, ultimately, we've got to make sure we understand from the candidate's perspective, what do they mean by culture?
Right. And I think that candidates, and I think that the employers, looking at it as, this isn't what you had spoken to earlier, which is, this isn't a temporary thing, meaning we have to do this just right now, but we're,
Right.
And the other thing that you and I talked about when we talked about on the phone, we were talking last week about this conversation. And one of the things we talked about was that you want to be transparent with the people that you're bringing into your organization. These are our pain points. This is what we're working on. This is where we're really successful, and this is where we're struggling. And these are the initiatives we have to overcome those struggles. So it depends on who that person is that you're talking to. I think that sometimes, people want the organization to be transparent and to value, kind of what we're all working on, something all the time. I mean, us as individuals, and us as and in our companies and our families, right? We have culture in our family too.
Yeah, and I think for everybody listening and on at this time or listens later, this has been challenging for all of us, particularly in the HR function. In the beginning of the pandemic, it was really focused on, how can HR help us? And so that's a good thing, because we're always trying to be relevant. But at the same time, over time, we have to make sure that we're able to still influence the leadership to be doing the right things. Read a survey of CEOs that said they basically 90% of them know that they need to do better things in attracting talent and retaining talent. And then they flipped it over and said, what percentage of you are actually doing it? And it was very low. It was only like 60%. So you have a delta between those that know and those that do. And that's really where HR comes in, to try to make sure that we're influencing and helping the organization and attracting the right kind of candidates. I'll also say this too, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in the third part of the series. and everyone's doing different things, and you have to do different things and not sort of copy what others are doing and just think it's going to work for your organization. But let me give you an example. In the old days, you might have had, for an exempt position, you might have set up 4 or 5 interviews for a person to come in on a day, to move from one interview to another. There's someone to greet them at the front door. There's someone that's going to give them a summary at the end. Someone's going to walk them. It's a very high touch, personal process. Now, what we're doing right now is a meeting. See, I'm not interviewing anybody, but we're having a conversation, and it's 2D, and it's very difficult to do that. Not only as the interviewer, But think about that, and maybe some of you have. I have on my side listened to people asking me questions in an interview format in this modality, and it's very challenging. And then thinking about how to make it easiest on the candidate, not necessarily easiest on the internal folks. So I'll give you an example. So you have 3 interviews with three different people, and one's going to start 1 hour, then the next hour, and then the next hour. And the first person comes on and just starts asking questions. They're not the person that's greeting you at the door, let's say. The last person asks questions, and they're not the person to say, okay, here's the next steps in the process. Thanks for doing this. They've all just attended 3 meetings because this modality is the way that people are working every day. So we've got to make sure that we're, training, giving examples of how you switch from doing an internal meeting to actually doing an interview in this modality, which is really 2D. Kelsey, do you have a question? Is there a question?
Yeah. So we have a question that just came in. Any suggestions for giving candidates a better experience when interviewing via an online platform like Zoom or Teams?
Yeah, so I'll give some thoughts, and Lauren, jump in as well. I was reading this, and it's kind of counterintuitive. If you want to stand out as an organization, put something together about how to do the interviewing process in Zoom like we're doing right now, and send that to the candidates that you're going to interview before they interview. So it's sort of tips for them when they're interviewing, what can help them, and also what are some things that could help them in terms of the types of questions that would be good for this position. So notice what I'm doing. And I got to do that for every candidate to make sure that I'm giving everybody the same opportunity. But if nobody else is doing that, that candidate's going to respond by saying, wow, they are different. They're doing something that's different than other people. And you're also helping it to be in a more effective interview as well. But I also think too, what I'm seeing is you have people that are interviewing, but they don't understand their roles and responsibilities. They know the questions they want to ask. But at the same time, the example I gave you with 3 separate people over 3 hours, from a common sense standpoint, what would be a better way to do that? How about 1 hour with 3 people, and they've talked in advance, and they all get to hear the same thing, because when they debrief, they've all had a different experience, and that candidate has been a quote away from work for 3 hours instead of 1.
Right.
And so if we're going to be quick and nimble, we got to make sure that we're doing something that shows that we are making it as easy as possible and as simple as possible for the candidates to apply, to interview, and to join the company. And anything that happens before then had better be viewed in the first 2 weeks as exactly as what was said by that candidate, because what's also happening is people are joining. They had 2 other things that they were looking at, let's say, and they're leaving the company because there wasn't it didn't line up to them of what they were told and what they've experienced.
Yeah.
Lauren, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, my husband worked at Amazon, and I've had many candidates that have interviewed with Amazon, and I'll tell you, love or hate Amazon, they have really got their interview process down. They really, really do. And I admire it so much. And people really respect it. And one of the things they do is they have an interview coach, internal, that helps the candidates. Basically, what they're saying is, we want you to be successful. And you're here because we want you to be here. Now, you may not get the job, but we want you to be successful. And so that message is felt by the candidates, and they do what they say they're going to do. They say, we're going to go through this process, and you're going to interview here, here, and here, and you're going to meet this person, this person, and this person. And on Friday, we're going to let you know whether or not you got the job. And you know what? They deliver on that every single time. And is it a grueling interview process? Yes. Do you have to prepare? You better. You know, but they really raise the stakes and they raise the game for, there's a lot that they do right over there. And this is one of them. That candidate experience is exceptional. You know, we've had candidates that, you know, rush to interview. They get them interviewed. They go 3 or 4 interviews in a row really fast, and then nothing for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And
you know,
it doesn't work.
no. And if you think about it, they're displaying their culture. They're not
Right.
doing it in words, they're doing it in actions. And so that speed, we have to consciously think that we're going to have, in some cases, a job is open and you're going to report back to the hiring manager in a week that there haven't been any applicants. And the manager might, you know, be thinking, well, you know, gosh, you know, why is that? And so you got to make sure that we're preparing managers as well for what we're seeing in the environment, because that is also talking about with Amazon doing what they're doing is they have a volume also that they have to meet, but also it's a speed, it has to be a speed process. And are we going to make a few mistakes? Absolutely. And are we going to learn from them? Absolutely. But if we still have the same process in this modality, and we've simply just adapted it to sending out a meeting request, you know, all of that, and there isn't anyone that's being the advocate, right? That might be the talent acquisition specialist, but I know at Amazon as well, they have employees that are not managers that actually own the hiring process and participate in it with the manager to make sure there's alignment within the group. And so we have to be innovative. We always do. You know, my favorite phrase is change is inevitable, growth is optional. And right now we have to choose to grow. And what we're in right now, we can't think beginning, end, and it's going to go back to the way it was. It never does. It's forever changed. And there may be, you know, millions of people that choose not to re-enter the work process again in the work environment and are doing something totally different. So it is a buyer's market in terms of candidates, and we've got to treat them with the utmost care.
Well, you know, I know we need to turn to retaining talent, but I will say one more thing. I do believe that the interview as it was is not the interview of today, right?
Nope.
And so the idea, so I've had candidates where they've jumped into an interview and they're drilled on questions, drill, and they've dropped out of the process after that because it's just unsavory. And so I think that what people want to do is they want to think of it as a discovery call, right? Or a conversation, right? As opposed to this, you know, yes, we want to, you know, the reason why this person is sitting in front of us is because we do already know that they're qualified for the position. So
That's right.
So it's just the way in which we engage people and is so important. So I would say looking at the way the interview, the way we think about an interview and how that the people that are sitting on the other side of the table are receiving that. So Kelsey, oh, sorry.
Yeah, and Kelsey, just in just a second, I'll also give you an example. You know, we all have examples of some pretty, you know, funny situations in HR. There's always things that come out, you know, about an interview process. Oh, can you believe this? I know of a situation where a very high level position where the person was in this modality, and for the whole hour, the interviewer had a mask on. So the interviewee only saw the person's eyes. And so the interviewer had an advantage because the interviewer could see, you know, more of the face, but the interviewee could not pick up and could not get the feedback needed to be able to have a strong interview with that, because it was very distracting for the individual.
And this was on Zoom? This was on Zoom?
This was on Zoom, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On Zoom. Yeah, can you picture that? I'm interviewing, I'm doing this right now. I wish I had a mask, and I've got a mask on, and you can't see my mouth move. You can't see any inflection in the face, and trying to do a good interview when someone's doing that, it's just not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Kelsey, what do you got?
Okay, so we had somebody send in another question. It says, you mentioned that candidates are watching the behaviors of our leaders in our organization to get a feel for our culture in a world that has moved to remote or hybrid versions of work. Do you have any suggestions for recruiters to help support our leaders/hiring managers to be more accepting of this new type of work environment that a lot of job seekers are now looking for?
Yeah, Lauren, do you want to, from
No,
your
please.
vantage point?
Please, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, it's a great question. There's a couple threads in there. You know, um, at the end of the day, this is about trust and respect. This is this is about people understanding that the needs in people's personal lives are holistic in their work life, and we have to be able to meet those needs. And so this alignment of what the company is trying to convey and what the candidate is actually seeing, we need to understand what that disconnect is. The only way you're going to do that is through feedback. So if you think about it, we have to not only interview the candidate, we also have to allow them to answer some questions of us of, tell me about your experience. Tell me, was there a disconnect? Did you expect me to ask different questions than I asked? Was there something about the company that I didn't address? Make sure you're adding time for those type of things. And then the first part with managers, one of the most difficult competencies for an HR professional to have is influence without authority. We're trying to influence in a way that leaders are impacted by it. And we're not trying to necessarily get our way, but we have a vantage point that we want to be able to express. And so if there's a disconnect, there has to be some dialogue about that disconnect, not just the beginning and end of here's a job opening, we opened it, we filled it, here's the next one. It's about what's our strategy going to be? What's the problem we're trying to solve? We have to get out of this task mode in order to be able to do that. And the best way that I have found is you have to do it with data. If you're doing it with, your vantage point is really important, but it's anecdotal. So if there's actual data that you can share, that's going to be more impactful. So just to close on that, I remember one that maybe people are still using it, and there was an indicator in talent acquisition that was the accept to offer ratio. And I always found that one interesting because where I worked, it was always above 95%, 92, 95%. It was always above that because the offer being made is what the candidate will accept. You've already had that conversation. So if it's really low, then you really have a disconnect. So you have to come up with some kind of indicators like that are different, that can show that this is real. And when it comes to what's expected of remote work, I'm still shocked today that there are many organizations that hire a remote worker and mail the laptop, whatever the company's equipment is. There's no stipend to help them, quote, set up the office because somebody else did that before, another company. It has to be a practice of taking care. And maybe that first day should not be mailing. That first day should be coming in to meet the manager and to get the equipment, as opposed to mailing and then going into this format, essentially forever.
Yeah.
One other thing too, I think this is the point of transition we need to do, and that is talent acquisition. The inputs are because there are replacements needed or there are additions to headcount, new project, new program, whatever it is, there are adds and there's replacements. So if the process and the inputs are so great and the resources can handle, making up a number here, let's say the inputs are 100, but you've analyzed that you can handle 70. You have two choices. You have to get it down to 70, or you have to influence that says, hey, this is going to be 100 for quite a while, and we're being negatively impacted to our candidates' perception because we're not able to get back to them and do all the things that we know as HR professionals are the right things to do. I saw, I think it was yesterday, there's some software now that's popping up that's connected to that will connect to ATS systems. And for talent acquisition people, it's a one-stop shop. You go in, you know the person's phone number, you send a text, the thing sends a text to the individual right away, does follow up, and you're interacting in the ATS with systems that are making you as a company look relevant. So we have to look at all sorts of different things in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
But so let's talk about retention. I'm always amazed, and it didn't matter where I worked. Hiring managers would always say, or managers would always say, "Oh, I can't find such and such. You know, I can't find optical engineers, or I can't find production assemblers. They're just not out there." And it didn't matter where I was; it was the same kind of conversation. And my way of thinking of that was, why do we have a need? Do we have a need because we have a turnover rate that is so high that we're always having to look for someone? And so the problem is, if HR as an organization with the managers is not integrated well, you have talent acquisition taking the inputs, and you have maybe HR business partners that are trying to deal with retention, and they're not talking, and they're not integrated in the such of how they can help each other. And there's some things I think even for compensation professionals that are really stretching our comfort zone. And you know, you never want to get into a wage spiral, but yet we're in a situation with inflation, with people that move. The number that I've heard is generally people are moving for a 15 to 20% increase to another company. And they're looking for that because they know if they wait a year and get a 3.5% increase, it's just, they're not going to be able to keep up. So they're not as connected, if you would, to what we talked about, the culture before. They're more connected in meeting their needs, much like in Maslow's hierarchy, safety and security. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is. You can't control that. But at the same time, what are we doing internally to treat our employees, our associates, better or the same as we're doing with candidates? And just because they're there doesn't mean they're going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. And so we got to really bridge this gap on retention initiatives to stem the flow of the amount of recs that we need to fill.
Mm-hmm. Kelsey, I saw another question come in. Yeah.
Kelsey's here.
Yeah. We had another question come in. We're a little over time, but we can keep going if you still have time, and we're going to send this recording out afterwards. So if any attendees need to hop off, you'll have the recording.
Yeah, before they do, for anybody that's online or listens to this later, and I put one of these together, it's quite simple. It's an Excel spreadsheet, but it's the process and it's the culture around it. And that is continually doing retention risk assessments within the organization. And I've got a tool. Send me an email or give me a call, and I'm willing to walk through how to do it, what to look for, what not to do. I'm always amazed when you do a retention risk assessment the first time with a manager. Let's say there's 20 employees and 19 are green. They're not leaving. And then a month goes by and you have 2 people leave and they were both green. And it's like, okay, we got a disconnect here. And so that part of retention and the analysis behind it and what we do with it is as important, if not more important, than it is to actually attract, if we know there's going to be very few people that might be even applying for a position. True. Okay, so Kelsey, what's the question?
Okay, so the question that came in, Gloria is wondering, how does implicit bias play a role in hiring managers not seeing enough viable candidates in the applicant pool?
Probably need, Lauren, do you have something? I probably need a little bit of clarification on that. So implicit bias and not seeing enough.
I think there's, I mean, what I see, and I am not quite sure, maybe the question could be clarified,
Yeah.
but what I do see is a lot of bias. I do see bias about, say breaks in employment, or why does this person have so many transitions? And maybe that's what they're referring to.
Oh, yeah.
And
So this is, no,
yeah.
I think, Lauren, it's what we talked about the other day.
Yeah.
So the biases that we see in a resume that says the person hops around a lot.
Yeah.
Boy, they've been here 2 years. They go to, every 2 years they leave somewhere.
Right.
We're looking for someone to stay 10 years.
Right.
Well, you're hiring them for now, and hopefully you're able to retain them for 10 years if they're a top employee, but you're hiring for now. And I think when you look at the labor pool, we're missing a lot of people that are actually looking for roles, and they want to downsize their role going into the future. And this concept of, well, I don't want to interview the person because they have too much experience. It's like, okay, you're going to pay for a position at a certain level. That person is willing to accept that level of pay, and they have the skills to do the job. But we're going to make it more difficult on ourselves by saying, well, they're not trainable. They're all sorts of bias that comes with that. And we're just missing it in a lot of sectors of employees or potential candidates. So I hope that answers the question in terms of the bias.
Yeah, it's a problem. I see it all the time, and we really want to bring those. There's a lot of no's before there's yeses, or there's possibilities. And so there's so much possibility in people, and there's all this judgment that happens, at the resume level, which what we try to do is to bring the whole candidate forward, and their story is unique, and their story is, and I was just talking to a candidate this morning and said, I've been asked so many times about this year break that I've taken, and she has this fabulous background, and she had reasons for that break. There's all kinds of reasons. Taking care of I took a break. What's wrong with that? Good for you is the response. So I think that we tend to look, when I look at resumes, I look at the possibilities, and they're oftentimes in other organizations, and not my staffing agency, but looking at why this person is not someone I'm not going to talk to this person. So I think if we flip that around, you're going to have so many great people to engage with.
Yeah, and another tactic too. Again, I'm emphasizing that retention is really important. We're talking about attracting, but we're talking about attracting because that's the process of backfilling replacements or ads in the organization. And so if we know we're going to have not enough coming in on that side, we've got to figure out how to retain. But how can we deliver recommendations to managers that are compelling? And so one example I think that is really good to do is whatever the position that's open, the job title or whatever, search for that type of job on Indeed or LinkedIn. Just look through other companies and what they're saying in their job descriptions and all of that. And you might even have a few ahas. So that manager understands the landscape of what we're competing with. And by the way, the volume is also important. I searched for this job and I found 150 openings just in the Portland area. That's data for the manager as well. So we got to make sure that we're doing things to give them data on what the actual environment is on that. I'd also say too that another thing that's popping up in terms of retention, and again, this from a compensational professional standpoint, this is something you're always looking at. And we really, in the early 2000s, late 90s, we really moved to total compensation, which is your base pay is a certain percent of your overall potential compensation. And when stock prices were moving and everything, that base pay could really be at the 50th percentile or below because your total compensation was so much larger. Now, what employees are needing, back to safety and security in Maslow's hierarchy, they're looking for more fixed pay than they are variable pay. Now, that's not to everybody, but that environment is changing because I think many people have been burned by the thought process around the variable. And then when the pandemic hit, the amount of people that saw no variable pay and their base pay was lower, now you've set them up to find other positions that had a different philosophy of pay and immediately are getting a 20% bump. So you have to continually look at the environment and what people are needing. The best way to do that, again, with every candidate you talk to, what are they hearing? What do they think in terms of compensation with base and incentive for total compensation?
Yeah,
Okay.
interesting point. You know, one other point, I talked to a client today, and she said that they have a remarkable culture. And she said that they do surveys every month with their employees. So it's not like this one every annual. It's sort of like the annual review. It's like that doesn't work. Yep. And you've been there for 365 days and you're going to have the conversation once a year. It just doesn't make sense to me. But what she did say, which was so important, is she said we conduct surveys every month, but we actually do something about the survey. We take it all and we look at it and we share it with everybody and we talk about what we're going to do in these different cases.
And then you need to do it.
They take it very seriously. So I think the once a month thing, maybe the cadence might be too much for some organizations, but it was really, I just really appreciated they're very, very serious about employee engagement and satisfaction. And they deliver that in their actions, just like you said, their behaviors.
One thing really quick, because I saw someone named Stacy comment there, and she confirmed that a lot of her tech candidates, that's exactly what they're asking for, is the concern around too much variable pay. And so how else are we going to collect data that influences and impacts the company than truly understanding what the candidates are seeing in the environment? We have to have a level of intel that is so much greater in this external environment. And, I have always said over the years that when you want to deal with your own personal development, your own research, set up a 1 hour one-on-one every week or 30 minutes every week. It's a one-on-one with yourself. And it's your time to do research. It's your time to get intel, just as the organization does for its own products and services. The other thing is we usually have someone internal that is really good at this type of process, and that's our marketing department. We've got to make sure that we're well connected with tools they have, and can they help us find out what the needs of people are in terms of candidates. But I do come back to this thought process that what we're doing right now in this environment where, somewhere in Portland, I'm located, somewhere in Portland, Lauren's located, and then somewhere, maybe even in the US or the world, people are listening to this or whatever. So we're all connected, but we're really not. We're connected for a moment. And one of the incredible things around retention they're finding is that, and it shouldn't surprise us, just like it shouldn't surprise us all the years that we said remote work would work. We've now proved it, right? But the thing is that a manager of people, you have to be, in fact, Simon Sinek, wherever, how you want to pronounce it, he says, choosing to be a leader means choosing to take care of those around us. So think about that. It's taking care. It's not just calling someone. Everything's very formal now. You have to call someone and set up a meeting to have a conversation. And so we've got to make sure we're dealing, we're helping with the informal part, but I extend what he says there to candidates as well. If we have to not only care about the people we have, but the potential people that we're going to have in terms of candidates and applicants, and the manager has to play a role in that caring aspect. And I'll close with this. And I saw it online, and it was kind of a playful thing, but I think it really meant a lot to being human in this environment we're in. And the person had applied for a job, had interviewed, and the manager followed up with them the next day, the hiring manager. And that person went around telling everybody, I can't believe it. You know, even if I don't get the job, I know where I stand right now. And I have other things I got to look at, but you know what? I'm going to hold this one for a little bit because I think it has better possibility. And if we never do anything, if we say we're going to, like Lauren, you talked about with Amazon, this happens so much. If you ever say to a candidate that you're going to contact them back on a certain day or next week, and you don't do it, that candidate more than likely is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to return to them and say, oh, sorry, I haven't been able to get back to you, they may already have chosen something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to make sure that we're partnering with hiring managers to make connections with these candidates even before we're in the selection process.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that's attraction and retention, and great questions. Lots of stuff going on, and Kelsey's back on here, so there must be something else.
Well, we've come to the end, but
Okay.
Jeff's going to be just going to be returning 2 more times in one more time in February.
Hybrid
And
work
another
next
one.
time.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Hybrid work next time.
Okay, right?
Yep.
Yep. And then we have the interview process redesign, part 3 of our 3-part series in March. So make sure to join us then. And then here's just a few ways to stay in touch with all of us. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. I've included Jeff's email as well, so feel free to reach
Please
out.
contact me. Yep.
Yeah, please contact us. And we'd like to say just thank you again for joining us today. We know you have many options when it comes to webinars, and we're so happy that you tuned in. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Lauren.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you, Kelsey.
Have a good week. It's nice to have you all on. And Jeff, thanks again for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye, everyone.